I knew something was off when the new VP walked in and didn't shake my hand. Just did that limp two-finger wave, like I was the receptionist at a chain dentist office, and not the reason our last compliance audit came back cleaner than a nun's browser history. He introduced himself with that smug little grin some men wear like cologne, all fresh out of Harvard, and thinking they're God's gift to Silicon Valley. I watched him make the rounds, shaking hands with junior engineers who still had Cheeto dust on their keyboards, while I stood 5 feet away holding the meeting brief he was too important to read. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back when the company was just 4 guys in a co-working space, and a dream so half-baked it still had eggshells in it, I was hired to help with admin. That meant filing expense reports, sure, but also catching the 3 typos in the investor pitch deck before it went to Sand Hill Road, drafting the first HR policy on the back of a burrito receipt, and later, being the poor soul who translated engineer rambling into patent filings that wouldn't make a USPTO clerk swallow his stapler. I never asked for credit, never needed it. You don't sign up to be the face of the company when you're the one mopping up its messes. But somewhere along the way, my name started popping up on filings, not because I begged, because legal said it was cleaner that way, easier to avoid IP disputes when the ghost in the machine had a paper trail, and I was fine with that. I didn't need a gold star, just a quiet corner and working Wi-Fi. I like being invisible. There's power in being underestimated. Hell, if you've made it this far into my little therapy session disguised as a confession, maybe do me a favor. Hit that little subscribe button or tap like. I know, we're all just scrolling through life half asleep, but it really helps the team keep telling stories like mine. And trust me, this one gets weird. Anyway, things were smooth at first. I knew who needed what before they asked. I played translator between product and legal, between marketing and dev, between vision and execution. The founder used to joke I was the company's connective tissue, which is a nice way of saying I knew where the bodies were buried and how to keep the stink off. And then came whispers of an acquisition. A big tech company sniffing around, billion with a B. People started polishing their LinkedIns, trading sneakers for loafers, and acting like every Zoom call was a job interview. I stayed quiet. I'd seen windfalls fall apart faster than a 3-legged IKEA table. Still, there was a buzz, excitement, possibility. That's when Mr. MBA showed up, with his dress shirts so starched you could use them as cutting boards, and a voice that always sounded like he was auditioning for a podcast no one asked for. We need to streamline, he said at the first all hands. Cut redundancy. Create leaner operational verticals. Translation: I don't understand what most of you do, so some of you are going to disappear. A week later, my name was removed from 3 Slack channels and 2 project dashboards I had built. My calendar went from back-to-back meetings to one-on-ones with HR about transitioning responsibilities. I didn't get fired, no, that would have triggered legal reviews, but I was gently shoved into a corner like a Christmas decoration in June. My new title? Administrative support. No team, no access, no voice. Just a desk under the flickering fluorescent light near the printer that smells like burnt toast. No one said a word, not legal, not ops. Not even the founder, who used to send me late-night emails asking if a clause looked too sketchy. They all went silent, like my usefulness had expired the moment I hit 49 and started wearing readers. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just watched. Watched them stumble through investor decks I used to rewrite in my sleep. Watched them forget how to submit a patent. Watched them assign 3 junior staffers to do what I used to handle between lunch and coffee break. It's funny how fast people forget the scaffolding once the building looks finished. I spent my days quietly sorting old files, answering the occasional call, and training the bright-eyed 26-year-old who now had my old responsibilities and a badge that still said product ops even though she couldn't spell proprietary without Google. And through it all, I waited. I listened. I archived, because the thing about being invisible, they forget you're still in the room, and I never stopped paying attention. He announced the strategic realignment like it was a TED talk and not a corporate mugging in broad daylight. Big smiles. Buzzwords bouncing off the conference room glass like flies trying to escape. We're trimming the fat, he said, laser pointer in hand, pacing like a guy who'd just finished reading one book about Steve Jobs and thought he was ready to gut a company. No mention of names, of course, just charts and acronyms, and that god-awful PowerPoint template with diagonal lines that screamed, I paid someone on Fiverr to pretend this was visionary. By the end of the week, 3 teams were dissolved. 2 managers were moved into advisory roles, which is code for your badge still works, but nobody cares what you think. And me, I was reclassified. That's how they phrased it in the system update. No meeting, no warning, just a calendar invite titled Role Clarification 15 Min. My title went from operations liaison to administrative support. The kind of role they don't even bother to acronym. I used to have back-end access to our IP tracker, a floating seat in dev stand-ups, and early eyes on every compliance brief that touched the platform. Now, I couldn't even open the company wiki without a permission-denied pop-up blinking like a neon insult. I got moved, too. Out of my old desk, prime real estate by the project warboard, and into a cubicle that sat so close to the kitchenette, I could smell everyone's failed attempts at reheating salmon. No nameplate, just a sticky note that said Elizabeth W. Because I guess my full name was too much for the spreadsheet that determined my fate. And the worst part? Nobody said a damn word. Not even Kathy from legal, who used to cry in my office after performance reviews. Not Raj from engineering, who once told me I was the only reason the product hadn't collapsed under its own bloated code. They saw me get boxed out like a stray cat at a garden party and just looked away. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I didn't send the petty Slack message I drafted in my drafts folder titled "So This Is What Ageism Smells Like." I just sat there, nodded, drank the lukewarm Keurig coffee like it was fine, because I've seen this before. New blood comes in, needs to flex, needs a body count. And who better than the woman in her late 40s who doesn't post thought leadership threads on LinkedIn and doesn't start sentences with "at Stanford? We did it this way." He replaced me with a girl named Maddie, fresh out of a startup that folded faster than a cheap lawn chair. I was told to train her up, which apparently meant I had to teach her how to use the exact system I built. I showed her how to navigate our patent database, where the legacy access tokens lived, how to file an exemption without tripping compliance. She said, "Wow, this is more complicated than I expected." I smiled and said, "Yeah, it tends to be, when you're the one who wrote the damn thing." She didn't get the sarcasm. None of them do. They think systems grow on trees and legal filings appear fully formed out of some SAW product they saw on Product Hunt. Meanwhile, every time someone forgot a clause or used the wrong nomenclature in a brief, I watched from the sidelines like a ghost at my own funeral. No one asked for help. No one admitted they were drowning. But I could smell the panic in their typos. They forwarded my old files to interns. Interns. Kids who still put emojis in their email sign-offs. I watched them fumble through version control like toddlers with chainsaws, breaking things I'd spent years building to survive regulatory audits and hostile IP trolls. And still, I said nothing. Because they wanted me gone but not gone. They wanted the work without the woman, the system without the architect, the results without the relationship. I was inconvenient, too experienced to fire, too quiet to promote, so I sat, I watched, I listened. And quietly, without anyone noticing, I started printing things, filing them, cataloging them, not in a petty way, in a precautionary way. Because if you spend enough time being the invisible backbone of a company, you learn how fragile everything really is. And honey, this company had no idea how close it was to spinal collapse. The air changed the second the rumors hit Slack. Somebody's cousin's husband knew a recruiter at Tectome, one of those insatiable, cash-stuffed tech behemoths that buys smaller companies like appetizers. And word spread like free donuts in the break room. Suddenly, every desk had a little more posture. Every engineer started brushing their hair again, and LinkedIn saw more profile updates in 48 hours than it had in the past quarter. I watched it all with the same deadpan calm I'd perfected over the last year of being sidelined. You learn to sip your coffee slower, nod more, speak less. My inbox was quiet, except for one forwarded thread, an investor update that mistakenly CC'd me. Subject line: Acquisition Trajectory MVP Team Visibility. My name wasn't there, not even in the footnotes, but you know whose was? The girl I trained to replace me, Maddie, Miss How Do I File a Provisional Again, now suddenly listed as a key operational contact. It stung. Not because I needed glory, but because it confirmed what I already knew. In their minds, I'd been erased. The parts of me they still needed were being scraped off like the meat from a bone. No eye contact, no thank yous. Just quiet extraction, like I was a printer that still worked even after being kicked down the stairs. The VP, God bless his teeth-whitened smile, started giving speeches about optics. Said we needed to showcase innovation-forward leadership and clean up org redundancies. Translation: prune anyone over 45 and pretend the interns wrote the damn platform. One by one, the legacy folks got gently let go or nudged into transitional roles. I wasn't fired, no. Firing me would mean acknowledging my existence. I was just left out, cut from the invite list, left off the briefings. The dashboards I helped build were scrubbed clean of my credentials. The workflows I designed got repackaged in Maddie's shiny new Google Docs. I was no longer in meetings, I was setting up chairs for them. The deal was heating up. Word was Tectome wanted to close within the quarter. The office pulsed with fake urgency. Whiteboards filling up with made-up KPIs, everyone trying to look irreplaceable. The VP strutted around like a rooster with a Wall Street Journal tucked under his arm, dropping phrases like vertical synergy and IP leverage without understanding a word of it. I sat through it all, pencil in hand, highlighting old compliance logs. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I knew what they didn't, that the devil lives in the footnotes, and our IP history was a minefield if you didn't know where the bodies were buried. Then came the official reorg chart. It hit my inbox like a slap. Maddie had been promoted officially into a newly created role, Product Systems Liaison. a Frankenstein title stitched together from words that used to belong to me. No mention of the systems I'd architected, the documentation I'd maintained, the protocols I'd written when we were still using folding tables as desks. My name? Nowhere. I was listed under admin pool logistics support, the kind of role you assign to someone who orders sandwiches and schedules toilet repairs. I sat staring at that PDF until the letters blurred. That night, I stayed late. Maddie had already left, her screen still logged into the dashboard she barely understood. I sat at her desk, opened the audit log, and downloaded every version I'd touched in the last 5 years. Not to sabotage, to preserve. If things were going to spin out and I could already smell the smoke, I wanted to make sure there was a record. Not for revenge, for survival. Because here's the thing no one in that glassed-in conference room understood. Professionalism doesn't mean silence. It means patience. Precision. The slow, methodical stacking of facts like bricks in a wall. And when that wall falls, it'll fall hard. The morning after the org chart went live, Maddie walked up to me, holding a patent filing I had ghostwritten for the wearable module. "Do you know what this part means?" she asked, tapping the clause about sensor calibration. I smiled, took the document gently, and said, "Sure, let me explain." And I did, in detail, calm, helpful, exact. Because while she was learning to read the manual, I had written it. And I wasn't done writing yet. It started with a manila folder. Not digital, not searchable. Just a plain, creased folder I found buried in the bottom drawer of my old desk, before the reorg, before the demotion, before the VP with his prefab teeth and quarterly buzzwords swept through like a bleach spill. Inside were early drafts, original filings, annotated screenshots, notes in my handwriting with arrows, footnotes, margin fixes. Back when we still used Sharpies on whiteboards, and I'd stay late with the engineers to translate their rants into language that wouldn't get us sued. I stared at the folder for a full 10 minutes, then pulled open the next drawer. I didn't set out to collect, it just happened, like muscle memory. One folder became two, two became 12. My printer whined under the strain of old compliance reports, patent amendment threads, engineering approval logs. I didn't tamper with anything, didn't alter a single date or signature. I just archived, like a historian watching the empire forget who laid the first bricks. I stored it all in boxes beneath my desk, labeled not with dates or titles, but with feelings. This is when they needed me. This is when they stopped. This is when I knew I was gone. And then, without fanfare, it happened. Message pinged into my inbox from someone at Tectome Legal. Formal language, stiff punctuation. They were reviewing patent holdings as part of early-stage due diligence and had come across a filing from 5 years ago that named me as a co-inventor. Would I be willing to verify my contribution for record keeping? I stared at the email like it had crawled out of the screen. No one had addressed me directly in weeks. Not for anything real. Not like this. At first, I hovered over the delete key. It would have been easy, safer, no waves, just let the silence keep humming. But then I thought of Maddie, how she'd once asked if co-inventor was a ceremonial title. I thought of the VP sneering about legacy documentation bloat, and I thought of that filing, the wearable haptic sensor module, Frankenstein project that only survived because I'd sat next to Dylan from firmware for 3 weeks and explained how to avoid heat distortion in the embedded wiring. So I replied, short and professional, attached the original notes. Signed the verification with my full name, Elizabeth Jean Warren. That should have been it. But 2 days later, the same Tectome lawyer replied again. Their tone was different now, less canned, more curious. It cross-referenced my signature with other filings. Seemed I was listed on quite a few. They were compiling a full ledger now, but early indications showed I was tied to several filings that directly affected core valuation algorithms and platform optimization logic. Did I happen to know why none of this was reflected in my current title or equity package? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that question wasn't really for me. It was for whoever signed the deal. They'd opened the filing cabinet, and now the ghosts were walking. Over the next week, I watched from my desk as something shifted. The buyer's team started asking questions that made the VP frown a little harder. He stopped walking with that bounce in his step. Meetings ran longer. Legal started whispering in corners again. One of the compliance leads stopped by my cubicle and gave me a weird smile, like he knew something he wasn't sure I knew too. I kept my head down. Just a quiet woman near the copier with a badge that still worked. But deep down, a part of me had woken up. Not angry, not vindictive, just aware, because for years I let them believe I was just another pair of heels at a standing desk. A placeholder, a fossil, a nice to have, but paper doesn't lie. And signatures don't fade. And once the lawyers get curious, there's no hiding what's been buried. Not when it's filed, time-stamped, and signed by the ghost they tried to erase. It was a Tuesday when the binder showed up. Thick, ugly, branded with a sticker that read Preliminary IP Ledger Internal Review Only. I didn't see it myself, not at first. But whispers travel faster than bandwidth in a nervous office, and by noon, I'd heard from 3 different directions that something in the due diligence documents had spooked Tectome's legal team. Apparently, one of their junior counsels, some poor soul tasked with vetting our patent filings, had hit a recursion loop. The name Elizabeth J. Warren kept surfacing. Not once, not twice, but 47 times. Across filings ranging from early hardware modules to the machine learning routines we'd retrofitted for compliance automation. My name was on patents that directly touched every major product line they were valuing. That IP binder may as well have been a biography. The problem? I wasn't on any leadership chart. I wasn't listed on any equity agreement. Hell, on the org chart, I was still a floating box marked admin support logistics like I ordered toner and baked cupcakes for birthdays. Tectome didn't like that. Big money never does. They wanted clean lines, authority maps, ownership trails. Instead, they found a phantom with fingerprints all over the product. No contract saying I didn't own a damn thing. Still, I said nothing. I watched the VP get pulled into an unscheduled call with legal, watched his posture change, cocky to coiled. His voice dropped an octave. He started using words like oversight and clerical error. By mid-afternoon, he was in the glass conference room, pacing behind frosted windows, gesturing wildly with a dry erase marker he wasn't using. I sat 2 feet from the coffee machine, sorting mail. Later that day, Maddie stopped by my cubicle. She had that look like someone had handed her a live grenade labeled mentorship opportunity. Hey, so she started, voice syrupy, do you know anything about patent co-authorship? I guess there's some confusion. Like, your name's on a ton of filings, I didn't look up. I just kept organizing the stack of compliance memos in front of me. That's what happens when you write them, I said. Calm, measured, like I was explaining how to use the copy machine without jamming it. Oh, she blinked, like, you really wrote them? I nodded, still not looking up. Every word that wasn't in code, she left in silence. The VP tried damage control. I heard through the wall, his voice half laughing, trying to charm someone over speakerphone. She's just admin, he said, probably a legacy filing issue. We'll clean it up. Just admin. Like I hadn't sat in the war room when we pivoted the platform toward B2B. Like I hadn't drafted the response to that compliance warning that could have tanked our funding round. Like I hadn't filed 3 patents in 1 week to protect an API logic tree that he still didn't understand. That's when the silence stopped being passive. It became armor. I didn't storm into meetings, didn't bang fists on tables. I just straightened my back, sharpened my replies, and waited. Because I knew the binder wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. A door cracked open and the lawyers had peeked in. Now they'd want answers. Real ones, not from a VP with shoe-polished charm and buzzwords for blood, but from the woman whose name had started showing up where it mattered most. On the intellectual spine of the company they were about to pay $1 billion for. And I had no intention of whispering when it came time to speak. They summoned me like a ghost. No warning, no calendar invite, no polite when you have a moment. Just a knock on my cubicle wall from HR, Kara, the one who always called me Liz even though I never gave her permission. She smiled like someone apologizing for dog bite. They need you upstairs. Right now, upstairs, where the real glass is, where people speak in deal sizes and not deliverables. I took the stairs, not the elevator, needed the walk, needed the quiet. When I opened the door to the smaller conference room, the one with the bad Bluetooth speakerphone and dead ficus in the corner, the VP was already pacing. Maddie sat beside him like a shadow, still trying to grow into her host. Legal was there too, 2 seats down, holding a tablet like it was radioactive. No one offered me a seat. The VP launched in immediately, all smile, no sincerity. Hey, Elizabeth, just need to clear something up real quick. Bit of confusion on some of the filings. He said filings the way someone says hangnail or spilled coffee. Trivial, inconvenient. The buyer's team flagged your name on some patents, looks like a clerical issue. We're going to submit a clarification packet, he continued, already shifting papers toward me, just something formal that says you were support, not contributor. You know, standard stuff. That's when I reached into my bag. No theatrics, no slow-motion drama, just a soft slide of paper on laminate. A printed copy of the original filing for the haptic sensor module, the one that had started this avalanche. It had signatures from Dylan, me, and our former CTO, co-inventor acknowledgement in black ink, time-stamped, certified, unambiguous. The VP's face stiffened like a mask mid-melt. You're listed as co-inventor, legal mumbled. Like it was a dare to himself, I nodded, because I am. The room felt suddenly smaller. The VP gave a weak chuckle. Yeah, but look, it's a gray area, right? I mean, contributions don't always equal ownership. You probably didn't intend you used me, I cut in, not loud, just surgical. You used my work, you used my knowledge, you used my silence. Maddie blinked hard, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, then didn't. Didn't ask for my name to be there, I continued, but your legal team put it there because it was cleaner than fighting for the rights after the fact. They knew I authored the language. They knew I translated the architecture. And now that your buyer noticed, you want me to say I didn't exist? Legal cleared his throat. We need to pause here. Everyone turned to him. We've received a formal request from Tectome's legal counsel. They're asking for clarification on Miss Warren's role, title, history, and compensation package. They've also requested documentation on patent vesting agreements. Until that's resolved, they're pausing IP diligence review. The VP's mouth opened, then closed. HR's tablet slipped an inch from her lap. I folded my hands, not smug, just still. I wasn't angry. That would have been easy. I was precise. You want me to disclaim authorship, I said. What you should be doing is checking the valuation model. Because if they're smart, and they are, they've already redlined your numbers based on the assumption I'm the only one who actually understands what you're selling. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I stood to leave. No mic drop. Just a simple, let me know when you need the other filings verified. There are 46 more. As I reached the door, I heard legal whisper to the VP, you didn't have her under contract? And in that moment, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No fury, just cold clarity. Because when someone tries to erase you after building an empire with your hands, they don't just risk embarrassment, they risk exposure. And baby, the lawyers were just getting started. It was the email that did it. Not the five-alarm panic flaring in legal's inbox, not the sudden vanishing of the VP from Slack, not even the whispering huddle I saw between HR and comms near the vending machines. No, it was the plain, unstyled two-sentence email from the founder himself, subject line, boardroom now, that told me the scaffolding was starting to buckle. He hadn't emailed me in months, not since my reclassification, not since I got relocated to the cubicle zone where hope went to die. But now, the man who once called me his Swiss Army knife and lipstick wanted a meeting. In person. No assistant, no buffer. Just, can you come to the boardroom? Something had ruptured. By the time I got upstairs, the energy in the office had gone full crime scene. You could feel the blame moving around the building like a virus looking for a weak host. The VP's office door was closed. Legal's lights were on at 7 p.m. Tectome's due diligence portal had gone from in review to on hold. The founder met me at the door himself. He looked tired, collar unbuttoned, expression tight. Elizabeth, he said, his voice lower than I remembered. We need to talk. Inside, it wasn't just him. Legal was there, HR was there. So was the director of compliance who wouldn't meet my eyes. And in the middle of it all, that godforsaken binder sat open like a wound. A sticky note on top read, 47 filings named inventor, EJW. They didn't offer me a chair, so I pulled one for myself. Legal started. He was the same guy who'd once told me to use passive voice in filings because it sounds less female. Confirm the documents, he said, almost apologetic. They're valid. The USPTO records back them up. Elizabeth, you're not just listed, you're the named contributor in more than half of them. The buyer flagged this as a significant exposure point. The founder turned to me. Why didn't you say anything? I shrugged. You didn't ask. The VP finally slithered in 10 minutes late, face flushed, collar wilted. He tried smiling like the fire wasn't already in his lap. Elizabeth, this is obviously a misunderstanding. We're just trying to keep the narrative clear for the buyer. It's not personal. I looked at him and said, if it were personal, you'd be thanking me for not leaking the fact that your equity prospectus is built on intellectual property you tried to bury in a cubicle. HR jumped in then, voice sweet like Splenda. We've been reviewing your compensation structure. We feel confident we can make this right, retroactive acknowledgement. Maybe a spot bonus, no, legal interrupted, pinching the bridge of his nose. It's not that simple. She's not just owed acknowledgement. Based on the filings, the contribution language, and the lack of work-for-hire agreements for that period, she owns part of it. The founder went pale. The patents, legal nodded slowly. We didn't lock them down properly. Not all of them. That was when the room changed. The buyer's lawyers had made their move. They weren't just asking for clarification anymore, they were pausing everything. The acquisition clock had stopped ticking. The data room was closed, no more calls, no more investor updates. Tectome had sent one line, we will resume diligence once ownership rights are verified by the named inventor. That's what they called me now. Not admin support, not legacy staff, not Elizabeth from Ops, named inventor. I should have felt triumphant. I should have screamed, flipped the table, demanded stock options, or laughed until my lungs gave out. But all I did was sit back, cross my legs, and say, well, it's not clean, is it? The VP opened his mouth to speak again, but the founder raised a hand. Don't, he said, quiet, measured, you've said enough, and that's when I knew. They weren't calling me in to silence me. They were calling me in because I was the last thing holding the deal together, or the first thing that could burn it to ash. They scheduled the meeting for 10 a.m. sharp. No one ever does that unless blood's about to be drawn or wired. The kind of meeting where the air in the hallway feels heavier. The kind where executive assistants hover just a little too close to the conference door, pretending to check calendars when they're really hoping to catch a live implosion. The boardroom was already full when I walked in. No small talk, no nervous smiles, just silence, except for the soft thunk of a leather binder being laid on the table by Tectome's lead counsel, a silver-haired woman with courtroom eyes and zero tolerance for bull. She didn't waste time. She turned the binder toward the founder, flipped it open to a tab labeled WIP lead roles, and pulled out a page so thick with yellow highlighter it looked radioactive. 47 patents, she said, voice flat. 47 filings submitted over a 9-year period, all tied to core valuation areas: infrastructure logic, product optimization systems, platform compliance, adaptive learning modules. All filed under Warren Elizabeth J., listed as lead contributor, designated inventor. Several filings with sole authorship. She slid the page forward like she was dealing cards in a game where everyone else had already folded. Then she turned slowly toward the VP. You're selling us a company she essentially owns. VP blinked, smiled, tried to chuckle. That's not exactly accurate. Elizabeth was admin support. These filings must be administrative input. Form work, filing artifacts. He looked around the room for backup. None came. The buyer's lawyer didn't blink. Is that your legal position? The founder opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I let the silence sit for just a beat longer. Then I leaned forward, slow and even, and said, would you like me to explain the filing tree? Every eye in the room turned to me. For once, not with dismissal or indifference, but with attention. Like I was a map they suddenly realized they'd been using upside down. I reached across and pulled the binder slightly toward me. Flipped to the first flag tab. Patent hash US 1,109,823B, adaptive sensory throttling for embedded wearables. I remembered drafting the prototype claim in a cafe at 2 a.m. while Dylan panicked over voltage bleed. This one, I said calmly, was based on a firmware constraint Dylan couldn't resolve. I drafted the workaround. Engineering approved it. Legal submitted it. I reviewed the claim language and added the co-inventor clause myself. I flipped to the next, and the next. Each one a breadcrumb in the trail they'd tried to sweep under a rug. This one, I said, tapping the filing for our compliance logic engine, was the reason we passed the 2020 audit. The VP at the time wanted to license a third-party solution. I built this one with 5 engineers and no budget. Saved the company $2.3 million. The buyer's lawyer nodded. Your name's on the source notes. I smiled, small, tired. Of course it is. The VP looked like someone had unplugged him. He turned to legal, to HR, to the founder. But no one met his eyes, because it was done. Because the truth wasn't debatable anymore. Because in that room, in that moment, every name tag, title, and corner office had just become irrelevant. All that mattered was authorship, and it belonged to me. The buyer's lawyer leaned back, tapped the binder once, and said, until this is resolved, our valuation model is under suspension. We are not in the business of acquiring assets with contested ownership, especially when the contested party is still employed and present. Then she looked at me, direct, measured. Miss Warren, would you be willing to join us for private follow-up? We'd like to understand your role. More accurately, I nodded. The founder finally spoke. Quietly, she'll be there, but I didn't need his permission. Because somewhere along the way, they forgot that silence isn't surrender. It's a strategy. And mine had just paid off with interest. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate backpedaling. Slack channels went dark. Calendars cleared themselves like digital tumbleweeds blowing through a desert of panic. HR's tone turned syrupy sweet. Legal developed a sudden case of radio silence, and the VP stopped showing up entirely. No one said fired. Not yet. But when his company laptop disappeared from the IT shelf, everyone knew the guillotine had finally whispered SHHH thunk. Tectome formally paused the acquisition the following morning. No grand announcement. Just a short, polite statement. Pending clarification of material IP ownership and inventor compensation, due diligence will be suspended indefinitely. The kind of sentence that detonates investor calls and erases 2 months of hype in 5 words. The board called an emergency session. I wasn't invited, at least not initially. They met behind closed doors, CEO present, legal sweating through his collar, HR trying to spin a narrative about internal miscommunication and legacy documentation confusion. But the buyer's legal rep wouldn't budge. She kept pointing to the binder, to the signatures, to me, not as a victim, as an asset. The founder emerged 2 hours later looking 10 years older. He didn't make eye contact when he approached my desk. Just said, Elizabeth, we'd like you to rejoin the leadership team, effective immediately. I waited a beat, then replied, what's the title? He hesitated just long enough to sting, then said, Chief Innovation Officer. I nodded, put it in writing. He already had it printed. I didn't ask about the VP. I didn't need to. His name was already being erased from the internal directory by the time I walked upstairs. All his little pet initiatives, labeled on hold. Maddie, reassigned to documentation support, back where she should have started. At noon, I entered the boardroom again. This time, I wasn't asked to wait in the hallway. This time, I didn't sit near the coffee machine. I took the seat at the head of the IP review table, the chair they once told me I didn't need, the one they left empty out of habit and ego. The buyer's CEO was there now, first time in person. He looked at the founder briefly and turned to me with a nod that said everything, you're the one we came for. I opened the binder, my binder. Shall we begin? I asked. And no one said a word, no fireworks, no tears, no one screamed or begged or ran out of the room. Because real power doesn't arrive with sound, it arrives with silence. And silence, when held long enough, becomes gravity. I never raised my voice, I never leaked a file, I never posted a thread or staged a coup, or rallied for allies in back channels. I just documented, witnessed, filed. And when the time came, I let the paperwork speak. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit 'em.